Hello everybody, what's up and welcome back to Second Best Gaming. Today I'm going to be talking about my personal opinions and reviews, if you will, regarding the three big E3 2018 press conferences between Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo. So let's just jump right in. I think many will agree with me when I say that E3 2018 has played it pretty safe compared to previous years. After 4 days of watching press conference after press conference and being drilled with trailer after trailer, I must admit that I feel notably more underwhelmed than in years past. But why is that? More specifically, between the three big players at E3, Nintendo, Microsoft, and Sony, 2018 has seemed to be the E3 of, hey, here's another look at something you've already seen before. At the very least, it was an E3 full of game announcements that have already been announced, and in many cases, games that have already been released. What I want to do is break things down for Nintendo, Microsoft, and Sony and discuss what worked and what didn't work. So jumping right in, we'll start with Microsoft. I'll come right out and say it. Microsoft gave the best E3 presentation, in my opinion, and that's not just coming from a place of Halo-fueled fanboyness. While not the best showing Microsoft has ever had, Phil Spencer and the team came out with what is pound for pound the best showing I think we've seen from any company this year at E3. The conference started with a bang, Halo Infinite. Yes, many speculated that a new Halo game would be announced at E3, but this wasn't something Microsoft or 343 came out and pre-announced before the show. We had no idea about the new Slipspace engine or the return-to-form art style being incorporated into this game, so the way I see it, Halo Infinite was a pleasant surprise, and one hell of an opener. From there, the conference went into a handful of smaller announcements and closer looks at previously announced titles, like Ori and the Will of the Wisps. But I'll jump in front of this bullet and address what many are probably considering Microsoft's greatest mistake, which is relying too heavily on third parties. The thing is, Microsoft showed many third parties that we haven't seen yet, and they did a great job solidifying that the Xbox lineup of consoles is the premier place to play all the latest indies and third parties. While Microsoft is hard at work on their own first-party games, they need the third parties to do some of the heavy lifting, and they justified that with the huge announcement of not one, but 5 new studios that are joining the lineup of internal Microsoft development teams. Undead Labs, Playground Games, Ninja Theory, Compulsion Gaming, and the all-new Santa Monica-based studio called The Initiative are all going to massively increase the first-party output from Microsoft. I know it isn't that glamorous to have a man step out on stage and talk about companies he bought, but this announcement really does solidify Microsoft's place in the industry and reinforces the idea that they're listening to audiences and making necessary adjustments to make the Xbox the best platform it can be. So while we may not start to see any projects from these studios in the next couple of years, I'm super pumped for the future of Xbox, and that's what I want out of any E3 press conference. I want to be excited about the future of gaming. Of course, the conference did have a little bit of drag when they were talking about Game Pass, but this really is a revolutionary service that's going to force the hands of competitors like Sony in the future. While it might not be too much fun to hear about a subscription service that's been available for a little while, it certainly is a crucial element to the way we'll be playing games in the future. Programs like Xbox Game Pass will change things going forward, and you can bet on that. Then there was the closing, not 1 but 3 Gears of War games. Okay, we'll just say 2, as I know most probably aren't all too excited about the mobile game Gears Pop. Although that was quite a humorous reveal that they pulled. Gears 5 looks great, and I didn't think we'd see it so soon. Plus, its focus on newer characters and stories continue to show why Gears of War is still a relevant franchise in 2018. I think Gears fans should be excited. Of course, there were other exclusives and exciting announcements like the beautiful Forza Horizon 4, and a better look at Crackdown 3, a game that seems to be in development hell, and various DLC announcements for Sea of Thieves, Cuphead, and so on. However, regarding third parties, Microsoft holds a distinct advantage over the others when it comes to these announcements. You see, since Xbox is the first major player to hold their E3 press conference each year, the announcements of third parties on their stage is more exciting. Over the week, we've seen multiple looks at games like Kingdom Hearts 3, The Division 2, and Shadow of the Tomb Raider, but seeing them on Microsoft's stage for the first time is exciting. However, by the time you get to Sony or Ubisoft's conference, the announcements seem redundant. This is a smart move on Microsoft's end that not only causes audiences to associate these games with the Xbox brand, but it also catches us at our peak excitement for these games. Perhaps a bit of a technicality for Microsoft, but a win nonetheless in my opinion. Now let's move on to Sony's showing. What can I say? Sony really dropped the ball hard at the start of the conference. I get that the concept of being seated in a scene from the upcoming The Last of Us Part 2 was a neat idea, but having to take a massive intermission after the game's preview to transfer an entire audience over from one room to the other was not only a snore fest for all of us watching from home, but I imagine it was a logistical nightmare for those attending the show. Sony has put on some stellar E3 presentations in recent years, and this fumble felt very much like an old Sony mistake. But luckily, after a rough 30 minutes, things started to get a lot better. Before I get into the meat of the conference though, let's make one thing clear. The Last of Us Part 2 had an incredible gameplay debut, and the game looks absolutely phenomenal. Sony and Naughty Dog likely have another huge win on their hand, but that should come as no surprise by this point. Next, Sony went over Ghost of Tsushima, another game that looks absolutely stunning and I'm super excited to get my hands on. However, this is where I started to notice my main gripe with Sony's approach to this E3 press conference. The demos, while overall really impressive, were too damn long for me. The idea here is to give audiences a taste, leave them wanting more. Sony left me feeling like I'd seen enough to where I can now happily wait for the game's release date, knowing that I'm certain I've seen enough of these games, like Ghost of Tsushima and Last of Us Part 2. Compare this to Microsoft's Halo Infinite announcement, and that's a game I want to learn more about. I'm sure this is just a personal gripe, but hey, isn't that what this whole video is about? Following Ghost of Tsushima was Sony's first announcement that was previously unknown, and that's Remedy's Control. This is a third-party game that sends a huge sting, as Remedy has a history on Microsoft's platforms. A big get for Sony, and another great-looking game. From there, we went on to the reveal of the Resident Evil 2 remake, and some other games, including yet another look at Kingdom Hearts 3. Death Stranding left audiences with more questions than answers, as it tends to do, in a gameplay preview that was interesting to watch, but again, went on for way too damn long. If they're going to continue to leave Death Stranding this ambiguous, I'd almost rather not even bother seeing too much more of it. I guess we'll find out what the hell this game is when it comes out, or maybe we won't. This is also entirely possible. After the quick reveal of Nioh 2, Sony wrapped things up with an extended gameplay preview for Insomniac's Spider-Man. Now, I'm going to be incredibly biased here and give this game a huge pass for its 7-minute long demo, because, well, I absolutely cannot wait to play this incredibly attractive piece of software. Spider-Man looks fantastic, and I can see why Sony would want to end with this extended demo. This is their next big first-party release, and it's due out in just a few months. Overall, my gripe with Sony's showing, aside from their horrendous intermission, was their lack of brevity. This conference could have easily been condensed to about half of its length, but instead we were left being shown too much and having to wait while people traveled between theaters. It's a shame because Sony really did have a great lineup of games, although we didn't see too many that we weren't already aware of. But Sony doesn't really need too many new announcements at the moment because they already have such a great lineup in the pipeline. I think this year's conference suffers from previous year's trigger-happy premature announcements. We didn't need to know about games like Death Stranding until this year, but rather than it being an entirely new surprise, it was just another showing of a game we've seen before. If Sony could have trimmed the fat off the runtime and not blown their wads so early in previous years, I really think Sony could have cleaned the floor with the competition this E3. But hey, their showing was still strong and definitely sent reassurance to PS4 owners that great content is on the way. And that's pretty much where Nintendo fell apart. In fact, for the most part, you could probably say the exact opposite of what I just said about Sony's E3 showing, and it would be true for Nintendo. In terms of format, Nintendo really knocked it out of the park, and has been doing so for several years now. The Nintendo Direct format of presentation is effective, well-paced, and leaves out all the awkward filler. However, Nintendo's showing may be the one that left me the most unsatisfied. The show started with some Japanese game announcements, a new spiritual successor to Armored Core, some DLC for Xenoblade Chronicles, but then got into the meat with the upcoming Pokemon games, Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee. Reggie Fils-Aimé took the screen to go over the game, which is always a fun time. The game looks accessible, pretty fun, and the Pokeball accessory is going to be a bitch to find on store shelves. Mark my words. While this isn't the mainline Pokemon game fans are eagerly awaiting on the Switch, it's something new and it looks quite interesting. I have no doubts that this game will perform well on Switch, especially in a year that has very few big games coming to Nintendo's hybrid console. Not to make Sony's mistake by staying on one note for too long, Nintendo quickly shifted gears to Super Mario Party, a game that seems like the first Mario Party in a long time to actually be of interest. And on the Switch, I can't help but think that this franchise was made for this hardware. It's coming soon, and Nintendo showed some neat features of the game, and I think it's a nice addition to a lovable console. We finally got a first look at Fire Emblem on Switch, or Fire Emblem Three Houses as it's officially called. The game looks like it will satisfy fans of the series, but I can't say that I'm all too interested in Fire Emblem, so while this was a great addition to the show, it did nothing for me personally. Fortnite was then announced in the most spectacular way imaginable, with it releasing just an hour after the Direct presentation. This is how it's done. Fortnite is right at home on Nintendo Switch, and will give owners of the console something big to keep them busy during these slower summer months. A great addition to the Switch's library, and a pleasant announcement all around. Overcooked 2 got announced, Nindies were shown, but then the Direct lost all of its steam for me. Now I know Nintendo prefaced this year by saying E3 was going to be all about Smash Bros. But last year they said E3 would be all about Mario Odyssey, and then we got announcements like Pokemon and Metroid Prime. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate looks great, every Smash character together all at once, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't excited to finally play as the Inkling characters from Splatoon. However, at its core, Smash Ultimate is more of the same. Perhaps not a direct criticism of the game, but coming off the Wii U, a console that had little buzz outside of games like Super Smash Bros., I can't help but feel like we got to the next Smash Bros. Game a little too soon, and that it's not enough to satiate me as a Nintendo fan. Regardless, Nintendo droned on for at least 25 minutes of a brief 40-minute direct to explain all the ins and outs of the next Smash outing. I'm glad people are excited about this game, but to me it felt like there really was too much Smash and not much else. I would have really loved an update on Metroid Prime 4, or an announcement for the inevitable Animal Crossing Switch game, or the next Star Fox game, or just something big on the way that we didn't already know about. Nintendo Switch is doing incredibly well right now, but Nintendo needs to keep the ball rolling in order to prevent it from going the way of the Wii. Switch needs games, and while indie support is great, Nintendo is ultimately the one responsible for keeping the fun coming with this platform. I'm excited for the Switch's future, but this E3, Nintendo didn't share the brightest image of what the future looks like, so I'm mildly disappointed. We'll see what happens next year, but for 2018, that's a wrap. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, whatever, and if you're interested in Disney content or Disney video games, check me out over at WDW News Today, where I cover news and stuff related to Disney, but a lot of video game stuff, so if you're interested in that, be sure to check that out. I've got a lot of reviews and looks at various Disney games throughout history that you may be interested in. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.